Hi, everyone, and welcome. I am Heather Woolbridge, WITF's Director of Community Engagement. Thank you so much for joining us for this special screening tonight, hosted by WITF Public Media in Harrisburg and PA Post. Tonight's film took an in-depth look at what it's like for veterans, both in the courtroom and behind bars. We're now joined by a panel of experts to discuss the challenges that veterans treatment courts are experiencing and what the future of those programs might look like. Please welcome our guests, Joseph Darius Jafari, PA Post reporter and time-served producer, Chuck Abereg, who is featured in tonight's film, Tammy Ferguson, Eastern Region Acting Deputy Secretary with the Pennsylvania Department of Corrections, Josh Ho, Policy Analyst with Safe and Just Michigan. Josh is also the host of the podcast Decarceration Nation and was formerly incarcerated himself. Pennsylvania State Senator Pam Iovino, and also joining us to help moderate tonight's panel discussion is PA Post Executive Editor Russ Walker. Thank you so much for joining us. And we'd like you, the audience, to also participate in this conversation. If you have a question about maybe what inspired the creation of veteran courts in PA, are you wondering about the criteria used to be able to be eligible to qualify? Have you or a loved one actually experienced veterans court firsthand? If you have a question or comment, please go ahead and type it in the chat box at any point throughout the discussion this evening. And right now, I'd like to turn things over to PA Post Executive Editor Russ Walker.
Thank you very much, Heather, and thank you everyone for joining us tonight. I want to get right to Chuck Abereg and ask him a question. Chuck, thank you first for sharing your story and for including your wife in the interviews that Joseph did. Why did you agree to go along with this? This is pretty tough stuff.
I think I'm not going to get anything out of this unless I put something into it. So I wanted to give everything that I could to the program and try to help whoever I could help, with helping Joe do his job.
Have you been able to talk to anybody else in your home county who has been through the court? Have you been of help to them?
Yeah, I've dealt with everybody that's in the court. Right now, there are only 4 of us. So, yeah, I work hand in hand with them almost daily. I hear from them, and talk to them about how they're doing and how they're progressing, how I'm progressing, where I'm getting stuck, where they're getting stuck, those kind of things. Because everybody has their own unique perspective on this. So it helps, trying to see it from everybody's different viewpoints.
Well, thank you. Thank you for sharing that. We don't have the other person featured in the film here because he's incarcerated currently. And I wanted to ask Joseph a little bit about his experience filming that part of the documentary. Joseph, can you weigh in?
Sure. So it was a bit of it was a challenge because the DOC policy is to not show faces or use, last names, and it's for victims' rights. Claim that we're not allowed to do that. So basically, we had to figure out how to tell his story and humanize him. I mean, there was really a back and forth of like, how do we humanize somebody that you can't see? And we had a lot of back and forth on that, but I think we did a decent job with it. But what he's dealing with, I mean, he's not getting out anytime soon, and actually, what's interesting about the VSUs within the DOC, there's a lot of lifers in there as well. So it's not just a program that is meant for reentry. There's benefits to reentry, obviously, and there's really no carrot with the program because it's not like it makes them even more eligible for parole. It's really an opportunity to live a better life within prison and kind of be surrounded by other people like you who served in the military. Because at the end of the day, a lot of the issues that these veterans, experience, and we interviewed about 10 people, but we only filmed 2 people, and we only kept 1 person. They all kind of had a similar story, varying of their crimes. The one thing that they said is that what helps them through it, some had multiple stints in prison before, and this is their first time in a VSU, is that they were able to kind of see eye to eye with their cellies. more so than they were before. And so they were a bit more optimistic about their time out of prison later on. So it was an interesting experience. I mean, I filmed in a couple different prisons before, and it's just an interesting experience, to walk into. I mean, for anybody who's ever visited a prison, prisons aren't nice. They're really awful places. There's like a reason why this program exists, to like keep people out of prison in the future, and the reason why Veterans Court exists to keep people from going into the criminal justice system, prisons. But this is the first time I ever walked into a prison. I'm like, there are murals on the walls, and it's actually like it's actually quite nice. I mean, all things considered, it's quite nice, and it's a different environment. You can feel it when you walk in, and everybody kind of echoed that as well.
Well, thank you. And why don't we go ahead and take this opportunity to go to Tammy Ferguson, who is here representing the Department of Corrections. Ms. Ferguson, first of all, your thoughts on the portion of the documentary tonight that showed the Veteran Service Unit at one of the correctional facilities, and how successful has the program been, and what's been your experience?
Well, the Veteran Service Unit at Houtsdale is a very, very productive. It is a very active Veteran Service Unit. In the Commonwealth itself, we have 5 VSUs. 4 of those are in male facilities and 1 at SCI Muncie to also accommodate the female veterans. I think that when I hear Charles's words as a fellow veteran, I really want him to know that one bad act does not define him, that he has shown through his action an ability to really embrace an opportunity to extend beyond some barriers that were in his way, an opportunity to seek some services that were always available, whether he knew or did not know that they were available. And that is a big part of what some of the issues are with our veterans. They're not really certain of the benefits that are available. And sometimes it takes incarceration to really show that the benefits are there, that there's opportunities for vocational rehabilitation, for educational opportunities, opportunities to really repair family relationships. And I really found his message impacting about not wanting, not willing, and not really truly accepting that one bad day could define Charles Aberage. And so really, truly, I commend him for that. I commend him for embracing the opportunities extended by the VSU. VSUs as a whole are communities inside communities. And I know that it is said, prison is not a nice place. And certainly we're not ones to say that because you're a veteran that there is not a responsibility or accountability to society. But certain circumstances make situations different. And until we begin to embrace that at county levels, where we have diversionary courts such as veterans courts, we're going to continue to see individuals that may not necessarily have been appropriate for placement behind bars and really truly could have excelled in a community with much more to offer. But and I think the other part of the film that impacted me was the part where it said about transition from the military to the community, the difficulty in that, and equal difficulties in prisoners transitioning back to society. So, for people like Charles, that was a 2-time go around, and really truly, despite the challenges, he has found a way to success.
Well, thank you. And I want to use this opportunity to go to Senator Iovino. We know now that there are not veterans courts in every county in the state, but there clearly is pretty good evidence of the good work that they can do to divert veterans from incarceration. I'm just wondering, can you tell us a little bit more about what the legislature is thinking on this?
Well, thank you for the question. There is legislation right now that would highly encourage, it wouldn't direct, but that we would have a veterans court, some treatment court option in all 67 counties here in Pennsylvania. because the success of them at the the recidivism rate, it proves their success. And when you get a veterans court is this whole wraparound of services that is it is mental health and takes care of homelessness and employment and also if there's substance abuse, if there's domestic issues, so it's really it's a holistic approach to the thing. And I'm a veteran myself. I spent 23 years in the Navy, and then I was at the Department of Veterans Affairs in Washington, D.C. And one of the most impactful things that happened to me while I was there is that there was something called the Friday night dinners that were started by some of my colleagues at the VA, where most Friday nights we spent with wounded soldiers and their families from Walter Reed. And so it gave me this exposure to the visible combat wounds and the invisible combat wounds, and the healing from particularly those invisible combat wounds, it comes on that veteran to veteran level. And so that's what all of this, so things like these treatment courts and veterans courts are just, they're promoting that, and they're saying that continues.
Great, great. Well, I want to bring Josh Ho into this. And Josh, you are involved as an advocate for decarceration and and have been incarcerated yourself. And I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about some of the concerns you have about, whether or not the Veterans Courts programs that you're aware of, are they really open and accessible to everyone who needs them?
Well, I mean, I think you have to look at it you have to take a larger view, I think, in a lot of ways. Joseph actually did a lot of research when he was at the Marshall Project that suggested that a lot of the crimes that happen when veterans come back to the community are related to trauma that they experience in theater. And a lot of them have traumatic injuries that make certain crimes more likely to happen. And it makes me sad when, I see on the screen that a very large number of the people who commit crimes who have served our country, and my dad served this country and works in a veterans court, helps volunteer at a veterans court now, that a lot of people don't get the opportunity to participate in diversionary courts and to get some of the services. I'm glad that they do have a veterans wing, though it looked like at one of the prisons, which is great. On the whole, I think it's always better to have alternatives. I mean, think about it like this: 96% of all people who are incarcerated will be coming back to our communities, and how they come back to our communities matters a great deal. And hurt people tend to hurt people. And so the more you focus on treatment, the more you focus on outcomes, the more you focus on education, the more you focus on anything aside from punishment, the better your outcomes get. And that's really what we need to, I think, as much as possible, we need to focus on trying to make sure people are coming back in better shape than they went in.
So what is the biggest challenge? Is it money? Is it training for staff, for prosecutors, for the court systems? How can we get more veterans treatment courts slots open for veterans in this state who need it? And Senator, I'll leave that for you, and then Joseph, you can chime in.
Well, I think it is making them, first and foremost, making them available, and then if you're going to really do it right, having all of these wraparound services that they have legal advice, substance abuse advice, all of those things. We have a veterans court at the county level in Allegheny County, which is where I'm from, and it's highly successful. One of their greatest challenges is actually adding to the whole judicial piece of it, mentors. And when they add that piece to it, it's even that much more successful. So I'm not sure it's just oftentimes throwing money at a problem is what the problem needs, but I think it needs to be more just good veterans courts programs.
Joseph,
I'm gonna jump on that because there's a great point to be made here, which is And you can throw money at this, but that's not always the solution. And for veterans courts, that's not really going to be a great solution, period, because you talk to anybody who is in charge of these programs, they're not that expensive. Like a lot of times, you know, these programs, because it's done through veterans, it's you know, subsidized through like VA services, and so treatment is already provided through their benefits. I mean, only in cases where, you know, a lot of counties, for example, across the nation, they accept veterans who may even be dishonorably discharged. And so they obviously would not be eligible for veteran services. But I mean, that's like one and I'm not going to even guess, but it's a very small percentage of people who are like that. The state would have to pay for those services. For the most part, all you really have to pay for at the state level is what you'd already pay for a regular drug treatment court. You know, we've seen veterans courts explode across the nation much faster than we've seen with drug courts, for example. Drug courts were really slow to adopt because for the longest time, we thought drug users were criminals. We only treated them as criminals. It wasn't until the past maybe 10 years, we started recognizing that drug users could also be victims themselves. And that's the entire point of these courts, is treating people less like criminals and more like victims that can be helped. And so veterans courts are now getting massive pickup. And so, you know, it's not necessarily a question of, you know, are there enough resources? The resources are usually there. You know, one of the things that we did research on at before I was at PA Post was looking at how many people go into veterans courts. You know, one person in OV and in the chat mentioned that her husband or her fiance, I believe, was eligible for veterans court, but it was the DA who's decided no. You know, these cases, it's not cookie cutter. It's not like you have a certain case and then you're moved on. You know, a lot of it comes down to, do people know about the veterans court available? Do DAs make that accessible? Sometimes it's, you know, judges, like there's a judge in Iowa that I interviewed a year or two ago where he asked to do everything voluntarily. And so it's really complicated. It's because there's so piecemeal across the nation. There's not one standard. And even when, like the Senate bill that the senator mentioned, you know, it's just gonna advocate, like, you know, it's not gonna direct, but it's gonna, you know, push for more counties to do it. It still is going to be very piecemeal. Not every single county has the same decision-making process for people. You know, some, as we mentioned, you know, some people take felonies, some don't. Some take domestic violence cases, some don't. I mean, it really is, there's very little across the board here that people can see eye to eye on. And it really comes down to the will of the DAs to take people in.
Josh, have other states handled the veterans court setup different than how it's working here in Pennsylvania?
I think in almost every instance, it's kind of like what Joseph was just talking about, where you have different mixes and different jurisdictions of how the courts are put together and how the courts work. I think in some states it's more standardized than others, but I think in general it's a lot like what Joseph just described.
Great. Chuck, we actually had a question for you, which is, it reminds me, I wanted to ask you, are you a graduate now of the Veterans Court program, and are you free from that?
No, I expect to graduate in August, barring any unforeseen circumstances. But yeah, I should be done in August.
That's great. And so you're still checking in on a daily or near daily basis?
Yeah, check in every day and follow up with the court, follow up with the VA providers, you know. So yeah, there's just a list of things I have to accomplish every day.
And one thing I want to add with Chuck is the fact that, you know, when I reached out to Washington County and they said we have somebody in mind, when I met Chuck, I mean, the list of things that I would love for Chuck to go in on this, of like, you know, what he still has to do, because one of the things that really got me was, you know, Chuck is a former corrections officer, so he's been inside of the criminal justice system. And he mentions this really poignant part where he's all like, I thought it was going to be easy being on probation. And then he listed we didn't put everything in, but he listed off all the things that he has to do and all the difficulties of what it takes to be a part of this program. And I actually have a question, because I haven't really got to follow up with you since we filmed. What's going on with coronavirus now? Are you like still having to go in to take like your analysis test? Do you still have to go into what's going on with that? Or is it all like this? Are y'all doing it all through Zoom?
No, I still call in every day. just as I've always done. I call in every day, and they call me in usually once a week. And then it's done outside of the courthouse. It's actually, they set up chairs outside in the courtyard. You go and you sit down in chairs 6 feet apart, and they bring out the oral swab, and you do an oral test usually about once a week. But yeah, still having to do meetings with the VA on a weekly basis by telephone, still having to check in with probation twice a week, court via Zoom every month. So yeah, the process is still there, you know.
Have you, I just have to ask, going through a lot of that counseling over the phone, do you find that to be as effective or less effective than when you were doing it in person?
Oh, it's definitely less effective. You're not getting the feedback from the other participants. It's just one-on-one, me with the physician, you know, so the whole group isn't there. So yeah, you're definitely not getting the same attitude and you know, the same feelings that you get from actually sitting in that group every week, you know. But one of the things, like Joseph had mentioned about, you know, some of the benefits, I mean, obviously there's great benefit to veterans court, and the more people that I can help steer to treatment courts, I will do. I volunteer frequently with the VA down in Pittsburgh, so I'm down there all the time. I'm also working with the city mission, so dealing with those people. So I'm out there trying to, you know, get more people involved in this process. And until we, you know, incarcerating people is not cheap. You know, so that's not the cheap way out, is locking someone up. And then we often talk about having to bring them back into society once we bring them out of jail. So we have to retrain them again. When you do that with a veteran, you're actually doing that for his 4th or 5th time in his life, where he's being retrained. You know, there's a reason why veterans think along the lines that they think. That initial 8 weeks that you're in boot camp, I don't care if it's Army, Navy, Air Force, or Marines, that initial 8 weeks is meant to break you down and make you the person they want you to be. Once a weapon is broken, we fix it. We don't just throw it away. So what we have out there is a lot of broken weapons wandering around that nobody is wanting to fix. It isn't their problem anymore. So until we start making it all of our problems and looking at what is causing these addictions, why is the addiction rate in veterans so much higher than it is in the general public? What is going on there? You know, so unless we start looking at these issues, incarceration is going to continue to climb. You know, whenever I started with the Pennsylvania Department of Corrections back in 1995, we had 13 prisons in Pennsylvania. I believe we're up to 28 now. You know, so just in that time frame, in my short 20-year career, we more than doubled the prisons that we've had to build in Pennsylvania. Is it because the people in Pennsylvania have become worse? No, we're incarcerating at a larger rates than ever before. I look back at just the status in my own county. Right now in Washington County, back in 1940, our population was actually 2,000 people more than it is today. But yet our incarceration rate coming out of Washington County is probably at 90% higher than it was in 1940. Did the people in Washington County all of a sudden become bad people? Or are we incarcerating at a lot higher rate because we don't know how to deal with these people? So we need to take a break from the incarceration, take a step back, put a pause on this for a minute, and take a look at what's causing these people to end up with the problems that they have.
Josh, you want to say something here?
I just want to say that one thing to put that all in context, since I was really great what Charles just said, is that, you know, actually our national crime rates are as low as they've been since 1967. That's, you know, crime is actually, and that's before COVID. After COVID, they've gone even farther down. So this notion that we should be incarcerating more people doesn't make a lot of sense, given that crime is actually declining in the United States.
Tammy, I wanted to bring you back in here. You know, Chuck used to work on the same side of the equation as you, and when you hear his sort of impassioned statement there, I just wanted to get your reaction.
Well, I think what we need to understand is really Pennsylvania, the number of veterans, prior veterans that are employed by the Pennsylvania Department of Corrections and current reservists employed by the department is really astounding numbers. And so what we find is a lot of our correctional officer staff or staff as a whole have that prior military experience. And what I would say is Charles is not alone in his challenges with the criminal justice system as a correctional officer. Um, and I believe that when we look first, just to provide some clarification, Pennsylvania's population rate is the lowest that it's been in decades, at about 43,000. And certainly we're still one of the larger correctional agencies in the nation, but our population now is really decreasing with the current levels. But I find his question, in corrections, we are not sentencing courts. Our job is to assist in correcting behavior. As was said earlier, about 95% of those that are incarcerated are returning back to society. Our job in the correctional system is to help send individuals back, whether they be veterans or not veterans, better than what they were when we received them, with resources, tools, programming, housing, finances, and certainly it is not easy to return to society. And we saw that as part of Charles's story about the complexity of what he must go through every day as a re-entrant back into society. And what else I would like to say, Charles, we started the same year in correction, 1995. We share a lot there. But I hope that answered your question.
I wanted to actually just interject real quick because, to also give DOC a bit of credit here, we're lucky the fact, Secretary John Wetzel, who's in charge, who's the secretary of DOC right now. I mean, I was talking to somebody over at the ACLU of Pennsylvania the other day, and she kind of put it perfectly, which is like, we're lucky we don't have like a ghoul in charge of DOC right now. We have somebody who's actually really thoughtful and, dare I say, progressive when it comes to incarceration. And so he's actually been really on the forefront of recognizing that incarceration is a problem. We can't incarcerate our way out of these problems. And so, they tried to, obviously coronavirus happened, and that's an entire list of jumbled of issues that we can talk about in a way different panel. But, there was an attempt to shut down, one prison this year, Retreat. And of course, that's now kind of shifted and it's been used for quarantine right now. But I mean, that's an example of even Wetzel, he was caught on a hot mic saying, I don't want to close this damn thing. I get it. I get it from people that really need these jobs, but it's important to close these things. We don't need to incarcerate as much as we do. So I want to also give some credence to the fact that, DOC, especially in PA, for a long time, I think there's been this role of just eye for an eye justice. And I think we're now kind of getting to this point of, because of bipartisan, push of decarceration in the state. There are obviously some push and pulls here, but there generally is an understanding that we can't incarcerate our way out of problems in the state.
I wanted to ask a question of Senator Iovino because we've had a few people come in on the chat. They specifically want to know is what can be done to, one, mandate the creation of these veterans courts in every county, and two, how do we apply the similar standards across all these courts? Because we've heard repeatedly tonight that it's sort of a patchwork. Everybody is different.
It is a patchwork. And here's the other thing that we're sort of glossing over is these veterans courts are county level judicial systems. And so as a state legislator, you really don't dictate to counties what they must do. So that's there's that piece of it right there. But I think that one of the things, and maybe this could come out of the Department of Corrections to the second part of your question, which is about some standards, some minimum components to a program and what it would be, that I think that would be very helpful. I think once courts and counties understand the benefits to their community, to quality of life, to the cost saving, because you don't even want to know what the line item budget is in Pennsylvania for prisons. I mean, it falls like, slightly behind what we pay for education, and that's tragic that that's the case. But I think that once they realize the benefits of it, and that it is not that difficult to do, that people would embrace it.
Terrific. Josh, you want to comment on that?
Well, I mean, I think the idea that I think what we get caught up in a lot of times is a problem of short-term versus long-term budgeting. And let me just give you a quick, brief example of how that can happen. Like, one of the things that we often talk about is the need for programming. A lot of times programming is a prerequisite for getting a parole in certain states and certain parts of the country. The cost of running a parole group is, a program is like, a parolable group. It's like, much less than the cost of keeping all those people in prison. Each one of those people in prison is like $35,000 a year. At least that's what it is in Michigan. If you have a group of 15 people, you pay one therapist, you've already got the room, you get through that, those people all get paroled, say 12 of those people get paroled, you've saved yourself $1 million. So this idea that it's just a simple cost calculation just isn't true. In the short-term sense it is, but too often we sacrifice long-term good for short-term budgeting, and it ends up costing us in
the end. Terrific. Chuck, we have a question for you, which is that, let me just pull it up here. Someone wanted to know, do you have a mentor as you're going through the Veterans Court, and how has that mentor role been important for you?
I don't have a mentor. I have volunteered to become a mentor once I graduate. Currently, I don't know that we have any mentors in the program, but that's something I'm looking to do on my exodus, is make sure I stick around.
That's great. That's terrific. Tammy, we were just talking about the corrections and the costs of holding so many prisoners, and how a little bit of money spent up front can save us a lot in the long term. Do you have any response to that?
Well, as also, everybody that works for corrections is also a taxpayer in the great Commonwealth. But, it's a $2 billion business, and it's $2 billion business that could be spent in education, services, social services in the communities at the county levels, introducing some additional efforts for drug treatment programs in the communities that don't result in incarceration. Our goals are the same as the goals in society, where we can address the issues without incarceration. Certainly that is really truly what the goal is. As personal as a taxpayer, there are a lot of different ways that we could spend $2 billion. But what I will tell you is, and I say this with great pride, Pennsylvania is the forefront of correctional systems across the nation. And part of that, as discussed earlier, was because we have a fantastic leader in Secretary Wetzel. He's an out-of-the-box thinker. He's not afraid to introduce things that are believed to be evidence-based, that aren't producing, as was said earlier, the expected outcomes. They've got to go, because what doesn't work isn't help fix the problem. But what else I would like to add in there when we talk about mentorship, and to sort of come off a little bit on some things that Senator Ivina said in the eastern part of the state, and I know it may sound odd, but it's very, very productive. In one of our eastern facilities, there's actually a court. Part of their mentorship is with incarcerated individuals inside SCI Phoenix. And as part of their transition through veterans courts, they actually bring them in to SCI Phoenix and sit with them in group discussions with individuals that are incarcerated, to try to really provide mentoring, to try to encourage them to utilize the resources of veterans inside of VSU, mentoring individuals that are going through veterans court in a servicing county. And when you want to see impact, that's impact. And it's really part of it's a requirement through that system when you're going through that veterans court that you participate. And is said about the resources for veterans courts, we don't assume any of that financial cost. That's assumed by volunteer services in the community, bringing those veterans into the facility for those peer mentoring opportunities. And it's embraced. It's a new thought process. Again, that out of the box thinking. VSUs did not exist in corrections not so long ago. But when you look at the need for community support inside a correctional facility, there's nothing greater to see than a group of veterans embracing each other through what has to be the most difficult time in their lives.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much for that. Pretty close to the top of the hour here, and I just wanted to invite Joseph to talk a little bit more about his work on criminal justice in terms of his reporting for PA Post, and prior to that for the Marshall Project. For anyone who's watching who doesn't know, that's a nonprofit newsroom based in New York City that's run by a former executive editor of the New York Times that covers criminal justice issues. So Joseph, parting thoughts here and a little bit of talking about what your goals are for your beat.
Sure. So I've been in Pennsylvania now for about 6 months, reporting on criminal justice issues, and it's Pennsylvania is a fruitful place for stuff from a victim standpoint, from an incarceration standpoint, and from a crime standpoint, and so it's an exciting place to be right now. I will say though, just as kind of a look forward, we do a lot of. I think there's been a lot of work right now on how to properly cover the criminal justice system, specifically because this kind of goes back to kind of this entire theme, which is, why are we, looking at these courts now and trying to build them up? And I think it's because there's really a change in the mindset of how we view incarceration, criminality across the country. Even in the deepest of red states, we're starting to see some places kind of shift their mindset, mainly either from a fiscal standpoint or from a moral standpoint of there's just no need to incarcerate so many. And so I think it's a really interesting time to kind of follow the criminal justice beat, because you still have a lot of people who, view the criminal justice system as eye for an eye justice. And then you also have, a lot of philosophers and historians and academics who really kind of pinpoint the entire, criminal justice system back to slavery, as we've seen through the 1619 Project and all that kind of stuff. So I would just say, stay tuned. I think, for the longest time, there hasn't been really great criminal justice reporting in central Pennsylvania and across the state. And so it's really exciting to be here and reporting on it. And then also just, subscribe to our newsletter, The Context. We constantly go into criminal justice issues. Whenever I write it once or twice a week. And I make sure to do a deep dive in it. So if you're interested in this from the Pennsylvania perspective, both in on both sides of this equation, be it the DOC side or the victim side, or, from, inmates rights side, make sure to subscribe to that and follow along.
Thank you, Joseph. Couple things. One, tomorrow we're publishing a story in partnership with Rolling Stone magazine that Joseph's been working on. And I encourage you guys all to check that out. It'll be on rollingstone.com in the morning and on PA Post a day later. But we'll keep you in suspense on that for now. But I also wanted to say thank you to Chuck for sharing your story. It moved me. It was powerful. And what you said during this conversation, I think is something that, frankly, I'm going to go back and transcribe because it was that powerful. I want to be able to read it. And I want to thank you for your service to our country and to the Commonwealth when you were in the corrections officer. And I want to say thank you to Tammy and to Senator Iovino and to Josh for your time tonight and also for your service to our country.
Thank you for having me.
Yep, thank you. With that said, I think we're going to end the discussion unless there's anyone who wants to raise their hand and say, I need to say something else. Okay, Heather, take us away.
Yes, thank you so much again to all of the panelists, and thank you, PA Post Executive editor Russ Walker for helping to moderate a really, really engaging conversation. So thank you. And just a reminder that tonight's event was hosted in collaboration with PA Post, which is a digital-first, citizen-focused news organization created to hold Pennsylvania's government accountable. And its mission is to connect us to not only our home state and each other, but committed to deep dive multimedia reporting that's audience focused and distributed statewide. Head to papost.org for more information. And as Joseph had mentioned earlier, if you're looking for a convenient way to discover the statewide news that you need to know, you can get the facts delivered straight to your inbox every morning with PA Post's daily e-newsletter, The Context, and you can subscribe for that at papost.org. If you enjoyed tonight's screening event and conversation, maybe you would like to consider helping to make more events and others like it possible. You can click on the Support WITF button at the top of the page or visit papost.org to make a gift of financial support. And one more quick note to share. WITF is cracking open our archival programming vault for a special retro Our Town watch party. Loyal viewers may fondly remember WITF's Our Town series. It ran for 31 episodes, and residents in communities all across central PA used their camcorders, if you can remember what the heck those things even look like, to help produce a video scrapbook of the people, places, and things in their town. So we invite you to join us Wednesday, June 17th at 7 p.m. as we host a virtual Our Town Anvil watch party right here on OV. For more information and to register for the screening, you can visit witf.org/events or visit ov.itvs.org. Thank you to everyone who joined us tonight. Goodbye and have a wonderful evening.
Thank you all.